Welcome to another terrifying tale from Nightmare Alley. We want to provide content like this for a long time to come, and your support will help make that happen. Now sit back and brace yourself for another spine-tingling tale.
Top 5 Fairy Tales and Their Dark Origins.
Greetings, horror hounds. Welcome back to Nightmare Alley. Professor Spooky here, coming at you from an undisclosed location to talk with you about the dark origins of fairy tales. You might be thinking, hey, I thought this was Nightmare Alley, dark, gritty, and gruesome urban horror and creepypasta. So what's up with this fairy tale crap? Well, don't let childhood memories and watered-down corporate fables fool you. Those gushy, sugar-sweet princess stories your little sister couldn't shut up about when you were a kid had some macabre, ultra-violent, and downright vulgar origins. Heard of Grimm's fairy tales? Well, Grimm is right. The old folk tales and legends were about as dark and perverse as you can get. Naturally, I love the hell out of them. So I hacked my way through the nerfed-up BS fed to our kids by our corporate overlords right down into the slimy underbelly of the most popular fairy tales around. And now, here they are, submitted for your consideration, my top 5 fairy tale dark origins.
Let's start with the beloved classic Cinderella. You remember her story. A lovely young maiden is forced into a life of obscurity and slave labor by her wicked stepmother, mercilessly taunted and abused by her stepsisters, and made to sleep in the ashes of the hearth until the dirt and soot make her all but unrecognizable. Cinderella yearns for a better life and is provided the opportunity when she's aided by a fairy godmother and meets a charming prince at the local festival. Fleeing to beat the midnight deadline beyond which her clothes will return to rags and her coach will revert to a pumpkin, she leaves behind a single glass slipper which the prince later uses to identify her, and the two live happily ever after. Well, in the original Brothers Grimm version, there's no fairy godmother. Cinderella is helped out by talking pigeons and the spirit of her deceased mom being channeled through a tree at the mother's graveside. During the festival, Cinderella runs away from the prince on 2 separate occasions. The second time, the prince lays a trap of pitch which snags Cinderella's slipper. Not glass, but pure gold. The prince announces that his wife will be the woman whose foot fits the shoe. Urged on by the stepmother, the stepsisters are determined to win the prince's heart. But when the first stepsister finds that her foot is too big to fit into the golden slipper, she's ordered by the stepmother to cut off her toe. When the prince is alerted to all the blood running from the shoe by the talking pigeons, the ruse fails. The second stepsister's foot is too large also, and she's commanded by her mother to cut off her heel. Once again, talking pigeons save the day and the attempt fails. When the prince demands to see the final sister, Cinderella cleans herself up and tries on the shoe, and it fits. The wedding is on, which is all well and good, but not so good for the stepsisters. They attend the wedding, but as they walk to and from the ceremony, those pesky pigeons peck out their eyes one by one. That's right. I said the stepsisters get their eyes pecked out. Now that's one version of Cinderella you won't see in coloring books or on the kids' channel. For our number 4 dark origin, let's tackle the cautionary tale of Pinocchio. The most important thing to understand about Carlo Collodi's original story is that his version of Pinocchio is a complete asshole. Of course, as the story begins, Geppetto's no saint either. The first few pages involve an all-out fight between Geppetto and the carpenter who brings him a talking piece of wood. The wood, as you probably guessed, becomes the marionette Pinocchio. Pinocchio's a menace from the start. In fact, he manages to run away from home, and when Geppetto finally tracks him down, Pinocchio manages to get the old man thrown in prison. Then when the ungrateful brat's reprimanded by a talking cricket, Pinocchio throws a hammer at the bug and smashes it against the wall. Unwilling to go to school, work, take medicine, or heed good advice in any form, the unrepentant blockhead is punished throughout the tale by getting robbed, having his feet burned off, getting hung from a tree, nearly being drowned, and almost being cooked alive and spending 4 months in prison. The worst punishment, of course, is the donkey fever, which turns him into, a donkey. After his no-good friend Lampwick convinces him to go to the land of toys where they both hope to never work or study again. In donkey form, Pinocchio gets repeatedly beaten, but things go from bad to worse when the injured donkey Pinocchio is sold to a local musician who wants to skin him and use his hide for a drumhead. Before skinning him, however, the musician ties a rope around donkey Pinocchio's neck and throws him into the sea. As if things weren't weird enough already, the story takes another bizarre turn as a school of fish eat all of Pinocchio's donkey parts, and what's left behind is once again the marionette, which is a crazy kind of thing to happen in any story. The restored rascal swims off and soon finds himself in the belly of not a giant whale, but a shark, where he's reunited with and rescues Geppetto. Despite all his tribulations, Pinocchio does manage to redeem himself and become a real boy. The ending isn't so happy for Lampwick, however. Still in his donkey form, the sorry sack ends up being worked to death by the local dairy farmer, and that's no lie. Okay, number 3. Let's talk Little Mermaid. Yeah, there was this little mermaid living under the sea with her sisters in a gigantic water kingdom, and she does save a prince from a sinking ship, and she develops the mother of all crushes on the handsome young lad. All sounds familiar, right? Not so fast. In this story, humans have immortal souls, but mermaids don't. They do, however, live to be 300 years old. The little mermaid decides the only way she can win the prince is to pass as human, so she goes to the sea witch, who lives in a freaky-ass house made from the bones of drowned sailors. The witch arranges for the mermaid to have legs, but she's got to give up her voice. Again, familiar, but there's also the slight wrinkle that every time the mermaid takes a step on her new feet, it'll feel as if she's walking on knives. Oh, and the way she loses her voice is by getting her tongue cut off. Sounds harsh, but if the mermaid can get a human to love her and marry her, they'll share an eternal soul, so, she figures it's worth it. There's a major catch, though. If the man she loves decides to marry someone else, the mermaid will turn to sea foam and die without any chance at the afterlife. Undeterred, the mermaid goes up to the world above where she succeeds in gaining the prince's fond attention. Only problem is, he's got it in his head that some other maiden, a young gal from a local convent, was the one who saved him. While the mermaid tags along, the prince finds the other woman, and since the mermaid can't voice her protest, he decides to marry her. The wedding happens on board a ship, and the mermaid even holds the impostor's train. When the prince goes off to bone his new wife, while the mermaid's gloomily standing at the rail of the ship contemplating her impending death, her sisters come to the surface. They tell her that they sacrificed their long, beautiful hair to the witch so she could have a chance. If she takes a knife and stabs the prince in the heart, she gets to live. She can even get her tail back when his warm blood splatters her feet. But it's got to happen before sunrise, though, and that's coming fast. The mermaid goes into the now sleeping prince's tent, but she can't bring herself to kill him. Instead, she jumps into the sea and becomes foam. But hey, there's actually a happy ending here. Her spirit rises up to the daughters of the air, and because of the mermaid's suffering and good deeds, she gets a soul. But she has to wait 300 years for it because there's always a cruel twist and life sucks anyways. Okay, let's get down to some nitty-gritty with number 2. I submit to you, Sleeping Beauty. True love's first kiss. True love's first rape is more like it. The original version by Giambattista Basile put a whole different spin on this time-honored tale. There is a prophecy involving a disastrous accident, which comes true. As a young woman, the beauty Talia gets a flax splinter under her nail and falls dead. Her dad, a lord, puts her corpse on a velvet throne in a country mansion and locks it up, as one does. Later, a visiting king comes along, discovers Talia, and the story says he gathers the first fruits of love, which means, yeah, you guessed it, he gets busy with her apparently not dead but certainly comatose body. The king then bails and forgets all about her. 9 months later, what happens? Out pop 2 babies. With the help of a fairy, the twins go for some mother's milk but suck their mom's finger by mistake, drawing out the splinter. Talia wakes up. Although surprised to find she's now a proud mom, she's happy to take care of the kids. Sometime later, when the king decides to go for another booty call, he finds the now awake Talia and the kids, and he fesses up. You'd think Talia would be upset, but for some reason she's okay with it. Everything's cool, except the 2-timing king has a wife. Suspecting foul play, the queen blackmails the truth out of the king's secretary. This evil queen, she's a real piece of work. As punishment for her husband, she decides to have the cook kill the kids and serve them to the king as a meal. Fortunately for the twins, the cook takes pity and hides the kids, serving up lamb to his highness instead. Meanwhile, Talia is still at the country home thinking that it was the king who had sent for the kids, and soon it'll be her turn to go live a life of luxury. Someone does send for her, but it turns out to be the queen, again, who cusses Talia out for being a homewrecker. When Talia tries to convince her excellence that the king took advantage of her, the queen's not having it. She decides to burn the beauty alive. Luckily, the king arrives just in time, wondering what all the commotion's about. The vindictive queen convinces her hubby that he ate his kids, making the king go bonkers and command that his wife get roasted instead. The secretary goes in the fire too for being a tattletale, and the cook's about to get burned next when he reveals that the kids are actually alive. So the cook gets a promotion. The king gets to be with his baby mama, and apparently everyone in this twisted immorality tale lives happily ever after. Okay, time for number 1 on our list of dark origin fairy tales, and the award goes to Little Red Riding Hood. Let's face it, this one's dark, even in the cheery corporate versions. We all know the basics: an innocent girl off to see her grandma in the woods, only to find a wolf in grandma's clothing. The earliest versions of this tale kept similar elements, but varied in several details. For one thing, the wolf wasn't always a wolf. What many of the original stories do have in common is that the wolf kills grandma, chops her up, then entices Little Red to eat the old lady's meat and drink her blood, telling her it's food and wine. If that wasn't dark enough, these original variations head out of PG-13 and straight into R, when the wolf orders Little Red to take off all her clothes, burn them, and then get into bed with him. Now, Little Red doesn't always die in the old versions. Sometimes she catches on to the wolf's ploy and outsmarts the lupine imposter. She does this by telling him she needs to go do a number 2, and when the suspicious wolf ties a string to her, Little Red snags it on something outside and then runs away. In other versions, Little Red gets help and defeats the wolf. One thing that's common to all versions is that the grandma-killing imposter seems to represent men who will go to just about any lengths to get a young woman into bed, to include killing little old ladies and making their would-be paramours engage in cannibalism, apparently. And maybe for this reason alone, Little Red Riding Hood is the most timeless fairy tale of them all.
So, anyway, those are my top 5 picks. What are your favorite fairy tale dark origins? Let us know in the comments section. Until next time, stay out of the woods and don't talk to strangers. Professor Spooky, out. Thanks for listening. It's listeners like you that make what we do possible.